Let's not get self-righteous about the words we use and don't use. You know the right words to say. Great job on your privilege, memory, and impulse control. Not everyone is so lucky, believe it or not. So I know we don't want to hear this, but the debate bro debate cannot be over. And unfortunately, it took me a while to realize why. And now, with the discussion of Breadtube's relationship to the manosphere, it's more relevant than ever. But it turns out it's just the same old tired argument about who has the right to self-determination. It's just rehashed as we move on to understanding the next ism, as if it's its own problem determined by the unique lived experience of each marginalized group. This is why intersectionalism is so important. Imagine for a moment a game of tug-of-war, our ropes all tied together in the middle. All around are people with generalized prescriptions that they believe should apply to everyone, and we would all see this if they could just pull hard enough. Every pull affecting every other person holding the end of a rope in unexpected ways. When it comes to ableism, most people still don't know what it is, let alone what it looks like or how to talk about it. When my video came up in conversation, it blew my mind how unaware everyone around me was to these issues. And most of them are neurodivergent themselves. As a terminally online boomer by now, most of my time spent and learning done happens on YouTube. I've come to realize that I am not seeing content on Breadtube that really seeks to understand the neurodivergent and our relation to society. Hardly anyone is even speaking honestly about their experiences or trauma, let alone articulating coherent and ableist arguments, especially not anyone mainstream. And with the rise of incel culture, it's more relevant than ever, perhaps even more so than sexism. This is why I want to talk to you today. I want to talk about not only being a little more honest with the people around us, but especially with ourselves. I want to talk about having better, more fulfilling lives and healthy relationships. I want to talk about solidarity and inclusion. And most importantly, I want to talk to you about some people you may not even know exist. The only way I know how to do so is through my own lived experience. So I hope that I can show you, whoever you are, that we aren't that different, you and I. I'll start with the idea that the debate bro space is too white. Of course it is. There are far too few BIPOC creators being seen, absolutely. There are too few BIPOC people being recognized for their talent in the world, period. But that's not the whole story. Let's not forget about other marginalized groups that these white creators might belong to. The pressure we are all under to be perfect in this society is immense. People look for any excuse to invalidate others' feelings, actions, or opinions, marginalized or not. We're easy targets, and we know it's wrong, but we internalize it, because all we want in the world is to be included, loved, and accepted. And so we mask our emotions at all costs. Some of us act like prey animals, hiding all our pain until it becomes fatal. Some decide they will be a predator instead. Either way, we become abusers ourselves, because hurt people hurt people. None of us have clean hands. And when we keep these anti-debate bro arguments so vague, whether we mean to dismantle the entire space or not, they can easily be used to disenfranchise those that may need this space, either as a way to make a living, find some direction, learn from, or maybe find people like them for the first time ever. What happened to diversity and freedom, lefties? Why do we even want to give people freedom if we don't trust them to use it? People will act in accordance with what they believe to be their own best interest. We must use this to our advantage instead, not by manipulation, aesthetics, or unquestionable loyalty to unobtainable ideals like the right. We educate, we empathize, we make people aware that there are better options, that they deserve better options, because deciding what is best for others is in and of itself ableist. Although I believe we should have as few copyright protections as possible, we obviously can't get rid of all of them. Unpaid use of content by streamers as a replacement for their own content is not okay. Of course, we should call out and pressure creators who abuse copyrighted content. But you know who's not going to change when we do that? Hassan. Instead, we should consider the problem to be more of a structural one. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism, as they say. Maybe our platform should have the ability to credit and compensate other creators fairly built into them, much like TikTok auto-licenses songs. This would encourage collaboration and engagement across the board in an unprecedented way. this is just one idea. I'm sure there are many options like it. And there are individuals doing things to help in the meantime. For example, there's a creator named Zoe B. She's a teacher and a writer and does not produce explicitly leftist content. And she is the only creator I've seen that has found some semblance of a solution to the problem. A while ago, she released a video called I Solved React Drama Using Science. This is what happened. Editing siren here. So I looked for the clip from Zoe B's channel and I cannot find it. I'm not sure if it's private or been taken down. But basically, she ran an experiment where she was able to give views to the creator being streamed. It was like 100 to 200 viewers, something like that. So it wasn't a huge boost, but it was something. And then she put out a video that I was going to link that said that she needed help and she had gone as far as she could with the project. That's a real shame. All right. Anyway, she isn't the only creator in adjacent fields of study doing incredibly important work for our cause either. You've got Mickey Atkins. She's a therapist talking about things like how ignoring the disenfranchised just creates more extremists ready to fall for the first strong man they meet. Her recent video about QAnon is excellent. You've also got Damon Garcia, a theologist and youth pastor who wants Christians to know that Jesus was a revolutionary, a radical, an anarchist. This is called liberation theology. We aren't going to convince people not to be religious, at least not in time to save ourselves, so let's not give up on them so easily. We spend so much time trying to perfect potential allies that we overlook the ones we already have. The Vosh effect, dogpiling, rabid fans. The burden of proof falls squarely on the accuser's shoulders here, in my opinion. Now, if the behaviors, values, or prescriptions themselves being shared are influencing others to act in problematic ways, obviously that's different. Destiny, Shonehead, and even Tim Pool make good examples of creators whose audiences are more right than they are, or who ally with conservatives but outwardly disagree with them, as if that's enough to absolve them. Cases like Destiny, tankies like Haas, and abusers like DJ Mule are also people I'm not defending with this argument. It's all purely anecdotal as far as I can tell. Allegations regarding lack of research and preparation are, however, demonstrably false. Most of these streamers have research documents, streams, or bibliographies available somewhere. Many are academics themselves. Besides, preparation looks different for different people. Not everyone can research, memorize facts, and organize their thoughts into coherent arguments, then write a killer script like this one. And are certain ways to prepare better than others? Because the ability to fact check on your feet and not get run over by others' behavior and emotions is a really important skill in and of itself. Setting and enforcing boundaries like these takes a lifetime of practice for some. There is much to learn about self-esteem and standing up for yourself from streamers and debaters. If it is safer or more enjoyable for you to keep your communication scripted, great. We want to learn from you too. But not everyone can sit at home focused for hours by themselves making content either. We'll see if this or streaming turns out to be harder, but I'd be really surprised if this turns out to be the easier one. Besides, how would we even measure appropriate amounts of research and preparation? If you don't set clear expectations, it can be really hard for people like me to know how to please you. So is it hours put in, number of words, biggest bibliography, most accurate? Without answering these questions, we can't make broad sweeping generalizations like this fairly. You can't ask anyone to do better if you are simply stating the thing produced is not good enough. How can someone do better if they don't know what they did wrong? Feedback that is not actionable or quantifiable is just abuse. This kind of informational gatekeeping can lead to some really reactionary ideas too. Bad ideals of knowledge creation and pursuit of dangerous knowledge were literal words uttered by leftist creators. Ultimately, I think this sentiment comes from a good place, but man, it still makes my skin crawl. When people are unable to make informed decisions, they become disenfranchised. They no longer know what is in their best interest, because creating and sharing knowledge must always be objectively good. You know why right-wingers don't want kids to have sex ed right? People with no knowledge are very easy to take advantage of. This doesn't mean that we don't fight against disinformation, of course. There is no bad knowledge, but there is incorrect knowledge. We must continue to use deplatforming and exclusion to protect ourselves. Things like TOS are necessary evils. The nuance is this: misinformation is harmful, yes, but it's not harmful because it's bad. It's harmful because it takes power out of the misinformed hands and puts it in the hands of those that would exploit them. It's when we start evaluating the worth and value of certain knowledge on behalf of other people that we run into problems. Unfortunately, there are two other popular phrases I've been hearing more and more as well. That's not up for debate, and it's not my job to educate you, and I cringe every time I hear them. The ignored nuance here is exasperating. The fear, as far as I understand it, is that even being willing to talk about why these things are true somehow immediately cedes ground to the opponent and makes us look bad. I've seen no evidence that being willing to even have a discussion is seen this way by the other side. That is a super interesting video that I would watch if someone can prove me wrong. Let's be clear here before I finish my point. Of course, we cannot compromise when it comes to white supremacy and the validity of any human. If someone were to ask us, we should emphatically state our position on these things with no apology or equivocation. Additionally, no individual person has any obligation to explain their abuse to their own abusers. It is always moral to exercise your autonomy and remove yourself without explanation from any toxic or dangerous situation or person. Keeping yourself safe emotionally and physically has to be priority number one, period, or you are of no help to anyone else either. Some people will do everything they can to take you down with them, and you don't have to allow them to. Ultimately, we need to put our enemies into perspective here. We can't forget that not everyone out there questioning the validity of trans people or preaching men's rights is Matt Walsh or Steven Crowder or Dennis Prager. Some people just want to be able to say the N-word, sure. But many, many more are just uneducated and lacking diverse communities. There are any number of reasons why someone could be holding less than savory beliefs. Sometimes people, regular people that you see every day, need things explained a different way, and it's not their fault. Some are so riddled with fear and so worn down by life that they don't have any time or energy for empathy anymore. Some people have been convinced that they actually don't have any, or they simply don't know how to show it. Or maybe they were never given a chance to show it. People are victims of the environment around them. It's objectively true. Our environments can even literally change our genes. Some people have never had the means or knowledge or catalyst to change their minds. Language changes and leaves people behind. And when we admonish those people, we just alienate them further. We aren't going to reach a great many people in this world, but we can reach the ones that are listening to those people. The subject of competition is the most interesting and personal for me, I think. From a leftist perspective, competition is problematic in a lot of ways. The great inescapable game we call capitalism teaches us to believe that people's worth is based on being better, stronger, faster than someone else. Problem being, there will always be someone better, stronger, or faster. And so as leftists, we see the futility here. The game is literally unwinnable, we know that. We reject the system as a whole and want to replace it, as we should. But then we internalize these societal values anyway, and we apply it to our social systems as well. More and more, we see our relationships as a very similar zero-sum game, but with social capital instead. If we don't have the hottest, richest partner and the most friends, we're considered worthless losers. Something is deficient or defective in us, we are told. True story. A friend recently expressed that they have no idea how you can have self-esteem without being better than others and being praised for it. They put others down with insults because they honestly think that's how you help someone get better at something. That's what their parents did after all. This kind of generational trauma leaves social conservatives susceptible to anyone that will talk to them honestly. Competition in and of itself is not the problem. Context matters. I, for example, don't compete with others to demonstrate my power or to feel better about myself. I compete because it helps me improve myself. I don't care if I win or lose, it's just fun. I am just as willing to praise my opponents as I am my teammates, sometimes even more so. I'm not perfect, but I'm not toxic either. I just can't see how this type of consensual sportsmanlike competition would be harmful in the big picture. To the anti-debate bro crowd, the debate bro sphere seems to be a gladiator's arena fighting to the death in a frenzied melee as those in the stands vicariously live their bloodlust. I won't say that no debaters or viewers act this way, but I didn't see anyone proving it's an overarching problem yet. And that's a big assumption to make about a lot of people. For example, I mostly watch video essayists, but a few of my favorite creators are these debate bros. I watch very few actual debates myself, usually just critiques and postmortems. I find the original debate pretty unhelpful to listen to, and they get really cringe for me once they derail. My emotions are heightened in a way I don't like. But when this happens, we have to look past that. Just because something makes us uncomfortable or hurts us doesn't make it bad automatically. We must judge things on their merits and not how we feel about them. Otherwise, we're no better than conservatives who claim trans people are dangerous when they really just think trans people are icky. Let's talk about being edgy. The good faith, bad faith argument is one that requires context to assess. Against bad actors, we cannot forget that our own ideologies and standards are easy to use against us. They are based on truly good intentions and solid praxis, which to the other side is automatically mistaken for weakness. When we fail as people to do the things we preach, all they see is a bullseye. This is, in my mind, the same as the tolerance paradox. Technically, we should always act or speak in good faith, but people sometimes use our empathy and internalized ableism against us. When we give people that part of us, it hurts when they don't care. Sometimes we have to deny people these things in order to protect ourselves. Being nice is not going to win us any points against those who want to exploit us. Of course, when questionable language is normalized, there can be broader implications. We don't like Vosh saying the R slur for perfectly good reasons. Slurs are objectively indefensible. They are at best useless and at worst abusive language that should be totally eradicated. So I'm ultimately fine with the latter happening. They have been weapons used against many of us personally, and they hit us like a truck out of nowhere when heard unexpectedly. And when you have a community to take care of, there will always be a line you have to draw as a creator, admin, or mod to keep harmful people out of the community and designate behaviors as unacceptable. And you get to draw that line anywhere you want. But let's not get self-righteous about the words we use and don't use. You know the right words to say. Great job on your privilege, memory, and impulse control. Not everyone is so lucky, believe it or not. And that doesn't make them bad people either. Take me, for example. I'm incapable of malice and spite. I follow all the rules to the best of my ability, literally all the time. And I always try to lead with compassion. I welcome challenges and feedback and can admit when I'm wrong. I would think such a person would be welcomed into these communities. But people like me don't feel safe in your spaces either. I watch non-edgy creators all the time, but I don't engage. I want to comment so badly on everything I watch, but I know I'll never say it right the first time. I have almost 4 decades of experience telling me that. And so I write and rewrite the comment, while ultimately I realize that what I have to say is not worth that much of mine or anyone else's time and effort. And if I send it, I usually regret it. And this doesn't just happen in the YouTube comments. For people with very black and white thinking, even agreeing to your rules may be a problem. Imagine this. You have trouble understanding the expectations of others unless they are provided in a very clear manner. You were recommended a Discord server so you could join a role-playing game group, recommended by a lefty streamer. You won't be allowed in without agreeing to the rules, which you may find too extensive, confusing, or non-specific. Or maybe you understand them just fine, but you think, what if I can't do those things? These are all fair asks, things that I normally do anyway. But if I say yes, and then I mess it up, if I can't guarantee it, how can I say yes? You get fixated on this, the anxiety kicks in, so you panic and launch into a stream of consciousness answer instead of just agreeing. Then boom, blocked on Discord, and you have no idea what you did or said wrong, nor do you get to explain. This is a real experience that someone I know has had more than once in the online leftist community. I also wonder if we're trying for toxic positivity here a little bit. Not everyone has to be safe and happy and have good interactions all the time to have a good life. We can learn from bad things just as much as we can learn from good if we are willing to put up with the growing pains. We try to shield everyone, which is a band-aid, not a solution, but sometimes necessary. Ultimately, the goal cannot be sanitizing the world of every offensive word or action so no one ever gets hurt. We will never be able to rid the world of all conflict, disagreements, disrespect, and hurt feelings. Someone will always say something wrong if they interact with enough people, because people aren't psychic. There will always be misunderstandings and bad blood somewhere, but we aren't required to accept the blame of others. Sometimes things are just unavoidable personality conflicts, and that's okay. Things can also be someone's fault, as in they caused it, but doesn't automatically mean that they should be held accountable for it either. It would be far more effective if we taught people how to cope with the world as it is, even if it's from the safety of our own homes and computers. We no longer know how to process our emotions, and it shows. For those who still want to control other people's language when it comes to racism, sexism, etc., do you know the extent to which you would need to adjust your language and even ideology to make neurodivergent people safe and happy? It's a much bigger job than you think. When I was looking for definitions of ableism and ableist language, I found all the usual culprits: dictionaries and breakdowns, the same copy and pasted 15 ableist words you should stop using today. You might have already known that idiot or psycho or lame are derived from derogatory attitudes about the neurodivergent and or disabled. This is historically and etymologically accurate, but it's just a teeny tiny part of the picture. So instead, I'd like to provide examples of the types of hurtful things we've heard all our lives. I personally would rather hear slurs all day than be treated in the following ways. All our lives we have been called tactless, selfish, impolite, crass, annoying, abrasive, oblivious, lazy, procrastinator, loud, klutz, picky, rigid, control freak, boring, shrill, anal, condescending, drama queen, neurotic, know-it-all. How about you only talk about yourself, you're overthinking it, you have no empathy? This was my mother's favorite. You have a short fuse, you talk too much. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Or you have no sense of humor. Maybe you always have to learn from your own mistakes. Tasks are labeled in relation to our expected abilities, not according to their own inherent attributes, such as being simple or complex. The golden rule and personal responsibility are vague concepts that mean something different to everybody. We are judged for our issues with hygiene or uncontrollable physical or verbal tics. People say we never pay attention, we don't listen, we apologize too much. We eat too fast or chew too little. We overshare. We often struggle to understand the nuances and concepts of consent, like age-appropriate relationships. Tone policing is another abusive tactic used against us that is not being talked about enough. Tone policing has nothing to do with the tone of our voices, and everything to do with how we say things. I'm going to use a clip from one of the anti-debate bro videos here to demonstrate.
So since these people are colloquially referred to as debate bros, we obviously have to consider what gives them that moniker, their ability to debate. Now, I'm not an expert at debate. I can hold my own quite well, and I can't say whether I'm as good as or better than the debate bros, but I'm also not particularly interested in their abilities in this context.
To me, on the surface, it sounds like this creator might be dismissive of the differently abled. It may indicate a less than holistic view of the situation being discussed. Now, if I were having a private conversation with this creator, I'm sure he would say he didn't mean it that way. Of course he cares, and I took it out of context. And I did. This is tone policing. The first time I listened to these videos, I didn't notice anything wrong. I listened to context clues instead of the words. Because when you look at Solari's whole body of work, you see a genuine and sensitive soul. When I emailed him letting him know I was going to dig this dead horse up and use a clip, his response had all the grace and warmth I expected. While I was writing this, I watched Loner Box's post-mortem on his discussion with Poly People. You can see when she says, "You should at least call it a genocide." He looks deeply uncomfortable. It seems difficult for him to keep from interrupting. He knows this isn't right. He asks, "If I won't say the one word you're demanding I say, is all my work and relevance invalidated?" It is apparently the least he can do. I'm sure if I actually watched live streams, I could come up with more examples. This emphasis on the right way to express support and solidarity, bad thinking, and expecting uncritical acceptance of hard definitive positions creates an incredibly toxic situation for people like myself. The ultimate goal is to create an anti-ableist society. This means that feedback is only provided in impersonal ways and is always constructive, with clear direction and goal. People don't assume other people's emotions. We are believed when we explain what we are and are not capable of. People here express their needs, desires, and expectations freely to successfully interact with their environment. The goalposts never move, and there is no gaslighting. Personal boundaries are always respected. Everyone acts in good faith. People trust each other to do what is best for themselves at all times. Emotion is not used to show how sorry we are, and there is no retribution. Only restorative justice exists, both legally and socially. Communication is judged purely on how effective it is, and not how pleasant or normal it is. All people operate on principles of free association, and all interactions are considered negotiations. If no healthy way of interacting can be found, everyone understands and moves on. If a particular person does not want to follow society's rules, they are free to leave or may need to be expelled. We don't treat basic personality conflicts as moral failings. Everything in our lives is a learning experience, culminating in who we are, and so there is no use for shame or regret either. If that sounds ridiculous or unachievable to you, that's fair. This is why all people and peoples must have a right to self-determination. It's the only way to prevent one group's solution from being another's downfall. We have to find democratic solutions in the end, which means not everyone will get what they want. When I ask for the world that is safe for me, why would I negotiate from any position other than the perfect one? I will not be compromising on my ideals. We need to understand that we are all humans with limited time, energy, and ability, however. Therefore, in the real world, everything changes. Everything is difficult when you involve people. People are exhausting and complicated and have all the same feelings that you do. To each according to his ability and needs, right? Why does our understanding of this phrase stop at an economic one? We can have any ideology we want, but if trying to implement that ideology breaks reality, we will have to do some reconfiguring. Imagine how the Vosh Flowers debate would have gone if either of them saw each other as the other side of the same coin. Inarticulate ideology on one side, stubborn practicality on the other. Two people caught up in the exact same abusive system where no one has or probably will ever have the agency they really need. Both correct, despite a fundamental difference in their respective group interests. Professor Flowers is saying that in this context, she doesn't need to consider whether a non-existent Black nationalist state could commit genocide as a part of their own self-determination. This concern has no bearing on their right to self-determination in and of itself, and is therefore irrelevant in this context. And it's understandable for Vosh to say, "Please don't genocide me, though." I can relate to that sentiment. I'm not great at wrapping my brain around the needs of groups I'm not a part of without explanation. But this is why we need diversity. We don't fight each other to get the world we want because we decide it is best for everyone. We fight for everyone's right to decide what is best for themselves so we can learn to live and work together. So yes, Vosh is right. He gets to say the R slur because he is one. I've never seen him attack any individuals or groups with slurs, nor have I heard him use any for a group he didn't belong to. Okay, yes, tactical N-word bad. This is absurd to keep bringing up. His personal growth since then is undeniable. I choose to adjust my language for the most part because it is more effective to do so, but I don't consider it generally necessary. Maybe Vosh can watch his language better and chooses not to, or maybe he can't. I don't know him or any other streamer well enough to say that, and neither do you. No one owes you an explanation for their behavior, and if you were less judgmental, maybe they would be more willing to tell you. But what I do know is that he doesn't mask at all, and that can be deeply uncomfortable for people around us.
For a while, I thought Vosh was actually a pretty good entertainer, right? Never agreed with him. But watching Vosh, I was like, oh, well, I can understand the appeal of this, and it's nice to hear, like, the other side of things. But he's weird. I don't like him. I don't like him. He actually kind of scares me. I think Vosh is one of those people where I wouldn't want to be in the same room as him. Just genuinely.
Yeah, don't worry. We've heard this vague, utterly unhelpful sentiment our whole lives. Someone has to face those determined to use violence against us. Ignoring them will not help. If your parents' favorite thing to do growing up was call you the arsler, of course you don't want to listen to someone like Vosh. But those of us who were not traumatized by these words and have decided they shouldn't have power anymore, I don't think that's inherently wrong either. I propose we embrace people with the ability to be unfazed and let the debate bros be the shield, or anyone else with the ability to stand strong against the incoming fascist storm. Things are only getting more dangerous, and I think we've lost sight of our big tent. We can't forget that it's a numbers game for us if we actually want to see change. We won't get there if we don't start creating stepping stones around us instead of barriers. Barriers that we create for ourselves just as much as others create them for us. If we can't recognize which ones are which, how do we tear them down? We have to accept that there are just some people that we will not get along with. Living in this world means pain and suffering, abuse and terror. We have a moral obligation, I believe, to help minimize this harm, but not by attacking everyone who does harm. We must teach emotional literacy and intelligence. Give people the tools to recognize abuse and stamp it out for themselves. With support the whole way, of course. Some people are not ready for you to save them yet. They just aren't. Or they didn't need it and you just decided they did. Conservatives know how to meet people where they are. We could do that too. They convince others through manipulation and lies, but we don't need to. We actually want good things for people, and we have to start acting like it. We have to stop the petty gatekeeping and purity tests. We are all a part of the alt-right pipeline, whether we want to believe it or not. The more people we isolate or help disenfranchise, the more useful idiots we create for the right. The more abusers we create, the more we are abused. We can break people out of this vicious cycle. So let's stop imagining enemies everywhere. Next time you're in public, maybe a grocery store, restaurant, or bus, pause for a moment and look around. Try to smile at just one person you wouldn't have. Maybe crack a joke if you're feeling brave. Think about how most of them are just average oblivious people that have their own issues to deal with, just like you and me. These people do not have their shit together. They are not certain about everything all the time. They are not more decisive than you. They do not have more friends or better luck. Above all, most of them are not dangerous, I promise. But it seems we've allowed our trauma, unchallenged, to make that decision for us before we even walked in. We especially can't expect our own lives to get better if we don't take steps to make it better. Yes, the world is out to get you, it's absolutely true. But that's because it's out to get everyone. We can get upset, or we can say fuck it. We can choose to focus on what we can do instead of what we can't. We can become our own safe spaces instead of continuing to live with a stranger that we hate and can literally never escape. Hell, we could even grow to like that stranger if we give them a real chance. We can start by reminding ourselves that other people's aggressions or missteps are most likely not personal. We can work on forgiving and being fair to ourselves. We can stop allowing ourselves to be controlled by our own fear, anxiety, and trauma. And most importantly, we can make a difference in other people's lives just by being ourselves. We don't need anyone else's permission for that. Not all of us can do all those things, but we don't need to. You just have to do your best. Doing anything more than that is impossible. So why are you still trying? I'm not. I'm hoping this may provide some healing, as it's been really tough watching my favorite creators hurt and burnt out. I'd at least like to start some more helpful conversations, and I've always got something to say. So my socials are below. I'm hoping to be live on Twitch when this premieres, and I hope to see you then. Bye.